Imagine waking up on the morning after Christmas. You walk downstairs in your own home, a beautiful home, in one of the safest cities in America, and you find a note, a handwritten note. It says your daughter has been kidnapped. So you call the police. They come, they search the house, and then they find her, not outside, not somewhere across town, inside that same house, in the basement. She was 6 years old, and nobody has ever been charged with her murder. That is the story of JonBenét Ramsey.
Let's go back. Christmas Day, 1996. The Ramseys had spent part of the day at a Christmas party hosted by friends. By most accounts, it was a normal, joyful evening. JonBenét and her older brother Burke, who was 9 at the time, were both there. They returned home late that night. JonBenét was reportedly asleep in the car on the way back. John carried her inside. She was put to bed. The house went quiet. And then, somewhere in the middle of that night, something happened. Something that has never been fully explained. Because at 5:52 in the morning on December 26th, Patsy Ramsey called 911. The call was brief. Patsy was frantic. She told the dispatcher that she had come downstairs that morning and found a note, a ransom note, saying her daughter had been taken. The dispatcher asked, "Is she missing from her bed?" Patsy said yes. Police were dispatched immediately. But here's where things start to get strange. When officers arrived, they noticed something unusual. The house was large and over 6,000 square feet, and despite the supposed kidnapping, both John and Patsy Ramsey seemed to be expecting their friends to come over. Over the course of the morning, family friends arrived at the house. Some were called by the Ramseys themselves. The house, which was now technically a crime scene, began to fill with people. And the police, at that point, did not stop them.
Let's talk about the note, because the ransom note in this case is one of the most disturbing pieces of evidence ever found in an American crime. It was handwritten in ink on a pad of paper that was later found inside the Ramsey home. The pen used to write, it was also found inside the home. Think about that for a moment. The person who wrote this note sat down in the Ramsey house, used their paper and their pen, and wrote a nearly 3-page long ransom letter. 3 pages. For context, most ransom notes are a few lines. Terse, threatening, direct. This one was almost conversational, rambling. It opened with, "Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully." It demanded a ransom of $118,000. That's an oddly specific number, and investigators noticed something almost immediately. John Ramsey had recently received a bonus, a Christmas bonus, of approximately $118,000. That's not public information. That's not something a random stranger would know. The note also referenced a small foreign faction, language that some investigators said felt like it came from a movie, not a real criminal. It threatened that JonBenét would be beheaded if police were called. And yet, the Ramseys did call the police. And yet, nothing in the note's threats played out the way it said. Handwriting analysts spent years studying the note. Some concluded that it was highly consistent with Patsy Ramsey's writing. Others were less certain. No conclusive match was ever made that held up in court. But the note itself, it pointed inward, toward the house, toward someone who knew the family. By the afternoon of December 26th, police were still treating the situation as a potential kidnapping. At some point, a detective asked John Ramsey and a family friend to search the house, to look for anything unusual. John Ramsey went to the basement. There was a small room down there, a wine cellar, sometimes called the train room. The door to it was latched shut. John opened it.
Inside, on the floor, he found JonBenét. She had not been kidnapped. She had never left the house. She was covered with a white blanket. Her wrists were bound. There was tape over her mouth. John Ramsey picked up his daughter and carried her upstairs. He was her father. He was in shock. Of course he did. But in doing so, he moved the body. He moved it from the crime scene. JonBenét Ramsey, 6 years old, was pronounced dead at the scene. The coroner's report would later determine that she had died from asphyxiation and that she had also suffered a skull fracture. The house that was supposed to be the safest place in the world for her had been the last place she ever saw. Here's where the case starts to fall apart. From the very beginning, the investigation was a disaster. That morning, before JonBenét's body was even found, friends and family had been allowed to move freely through the house. The crime scene was compromised before detectives even knew it was a crime scene. When the body was discovered, officers on the scene were not trained in homicide investigation. Boulder, Colorado, in 1996, was not a city that saw many murders. The detectives assigned to the case were experienced, but they had never handled anything close to this. Potential evidence was not properly secured. The crime scene was not locked down the way it should have been. And then the media arrived. Within days, JonBenét's pageant photos were everywhere. Her face was on the front page of every newspaper, every tabloid, every evening news broadcast. America became obsessed, and with that obsession came pressure. Enormous, crushing pressure on the Boulder Police Department to solve the case quickly. That pressure led to tunnel vision. Very early on, investigators focused heavily on the Ramseys themselves. The parents were not formally interviewed by police until late April 1997, 4 months after their daughter's death. And when they were, it was voluntary. John and Patsy Ramsey hired attorneys. They moved out of Boulder. They conducted interviews with media outlets on their own terms. To some people, this looked like guilt. To others, it looked like two grieving parents navigating an investigation that had already decided they were suspects. The Boulder police and the district attorney's office also feuded publicly. A highly unusual and damaging development that slowed the case even further. By 1999, a grand jury had reviewed the case. They voted to indict John and Patsy Ramsey on charges related to child abuse, resulting in death. But the district attorney, Alex Hunter, refused to sign the indictment. He said there was insufficient evidence to prosecute. The case went cold. So who did it? Over nearly 3 decades, investigators, journalists, and amateur sleuths have landed on 3 main theories. Let's walk through each one. Theory 1. An intruder did it. This is the theory the Ramsey family always maintained, and it has real evidence behind it. A window well in the basement was found to be broken. John Ramsey himself said he had broken it months earlier and never fixed it. But investigators documented that someone could have entered the home through that area. Perhaps the most significant development came in 2008 when then-new DNA technology identified an unknown male DNA profile on JonBenét's clothing. It was DNA that didn't match anyone in the family. The Boulder district attorney at the time used this evidence to formally clear the Ramsey family, saying the DNA belonged to an unknown person. That DNA, tested again in 2023 using new forensic genealogy techniques, still has not been matched to any known person in any database. so there is real physical evidence of an unknown individual. The question is, who was he, and what was he doing in that house? Theory 2. A family member was involved. This theory was the one that much of the early investigation focused on. The ransom note, written on paper from inside the house, with a pen from inside the house, suggested someone with intimate knowledge of the family. The specific ransom amount matching John's bonus, the length and odd tone of the note, the fact that JonBenét's body never left the house. Some investigators believed the evidence pointed to a staged kidnapping, that JonBenét died inside the home, and someone created the ransom note and crime scene to mislead police. Patsy Ramsey was suspected by some analysts, largely based on handwriting comparisons, though no examiner ever made a definitive conclusion. She died of ovarian cancer in 2006, never charged with any crime. Burke Ramsey, the older brother, was also the subject of speculation for years, though he was 9 years old at the time. He has consistently denied any involvement, and in 2016, he successfully sued CBS after a documentary implied his guilt. He was awarded a $750,000 settlement. Theory 3. Accidental death followed by a cover-up. This theory attempts to bridge both sides. It suggests that JonBenét's death may not have been a premeditated murder at all, but rather the result of an accident that someone then tried to conceal. Under this theory, someone in the home panicked, staged the scene to look like an intruder had been responsible, and wrote the ransom note in a desperate attempt to buy time or create confusion. It would explain the odd ransom note, the body never leaving the house, the chaos of the morning, but it doesn't explain the DNA, and it doesn't explain everything. Nothing does. We are now almost 30 years removed from that December morning in Boulder, Colorado, and the case is still open. Here's why it remains unsolved. The crime scene contamination in those first hours was so severe that certain evidence was compromised beyond recovery. Opportunities to collect trace evidence properly, opportunities that only exist in those first critical hours, were lost. The battle between the Boulder police and the district attorney's office created institutional dysfunction that allowed years to pass without clear direction. The Ramseys themselves, by hiring attorneys and controlling their own media narrative, made it difficult for investigators to gather the kind of unfiltered information they needed early on. And then there's the DNA. The unknown male DNA profile found on JonBenét's clothing is a critical piece of evidence. It could belong to the killer, or, as some investigators suggest, it could be touched DNA from an innocent person, contamination from the manufacturing process of the clothing, or someone with no connection to the crime at all. In 2023, the Boulder Police Department confirmed it was still actively working the case using forensic genealogy, the same technique that caught the Golden State Killer. But as of the time this video was produced, no arrest has ever been made. No one has ever been charged. JonBenét Ramsey was 6 years old. She had a whole life ahead of her, and the person who took that life has never faced justice. Here's what I keep coming back to. Someone wrote a 3-page ransom note inside that house. Someone used their paper, their pen, took the time, the remarkable, chilling time, to write page after page in a house where a little girl was asleep upstairs. And then that little girl never made it to morning, and that person has never been found.
Somewhere in America right now, there is a person who knows what happened inside that house on the night of December 25th, 1996. Maybe it's someone who has carried that secret for 30 years. Maybe it's someone who thought they were smarter than the investigation, smarter than the DNA analysts, smarter than time, or maybe, just maybe, we are still missing something. One piece, one connection, one name. Forensic genealogy found the Golden State Killer after decades. It cracked cases that seemed impossible. The DNA in this case is still out there, still in a database, still being tested against new profiles every year. JonBenét's case is not closed, and until it is, one question will keep echoing through every hallway of that big house in Boulder. Who was in that house that night? If you made it to the end of this video, thank you for watching. Cases like this matter, because behind every cold case file is a real person, a real family, a real little girl who deserved better. If you're new here, subscribe, hit the bell, because I cover stories just like this one. And I'll see you in the next one.